Hello and welcome to another episode of Prodigy Search Presents. I'm Mark Resch Jr., partner at Prodigy Search. I'm excited to welcome a good friend of mine to our interview today, Molly Arbogast. Molly, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Good to see you.
So first and foremost, let's be honest. Let's get this out of the way right away. My first goal today was to not refer to you as Molly Milady, so we're already off to a great I can only go up, downhill from here if I fudge anything up. But Molly Arbogast, let's not say how we know each other from before. So
there's a lot of people who still call me Milady just as a name. So Peter
great
Radford
name.
is one of them. So there's certain people that I'm just Milady and always will be. So
great name, rolls off tongue.
Yep, you bet.
Well, listen, you don't need an introduction, but I'll give one anyway, and people know who you are in the industry. Clearly everywhere from POV Sports to the WNBA, IMG and Learfield. I think you and I reconnected many years ago when you were at the WNBA. In part of that growth, perhaps early 2000s, if I get my dates correct, more or less.
Yeah, I think about when children were born. So, and weddings occurred. 2006, I was at the WNBA.
I thought so. With Donna, right? I think you were.
Yep, Donna Warrender.
But most importantly, what I did leave out, but I'm a native Philadelphian, and so I have to talk about the two most important stops of your career. Even if you won't say it, I'll say it. At the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and so. Obviously, you started your own agency a few years ago, which we'll talk about, but the Philadelphia Eagles piece is where I'm going to kind of leave off the final part of the introduction today. So we've talked about it. You've been interviewed in the past, and you don't shy away from it. Grew up with four brothers, right? And what I'm talking about is how did that either shape the way, your interest in sports, your fandom, but even more importantly, how you are competitive, your grit, your drive, as a salesperson and an executive in this industry. Tell me about the family dynamic and your upbringing.
It's a great question. And I think, when you grow up Irish Catholic in Chicago, I grew up in actually Lake Forest, which is the hometown for the Chicago Bears practice facility. Sports was a bit of a survival tactic in our household. You either knew what you were talking about when it came to what was on television or you didn't. And getting just a word in edgewise was a battle with one older brother and three younger brothers. So to me, it was kind of funny when we were season ticket members. Back then, they were called season ticket holders. We were season ticket holders at the Chicago Bears, and I would strategically start a fight so that all of my brothers would get in trouble on Friday or Saturday morning, so that my dad, who had a very short temper, God rest his soul, would say, "To hell with you, I'm taking your sister to the game." And I'd be like, yes. So excited.
You still use that to this day is what you're telling me. Okay, good.
You bet. There was a plan in place. But I think when you grow up with siblings, and again, being Irish Catholic, dinner table conversations are always quite loud. It definitely brought out the competitive spirit in me as a high school kid. I was playing lots of sports, field hockey, lacrosse, squash. I was an equestrian. I grew up riding horses competitively. And so I was kind of a competitor because of my passion for riding when I was a kid. And the brothers, again, helped with all the battling over who was the better Esposito, playing for the Blackhawks back in the day, Carlton Fisk and all these different characters that we would have an occasion to meet in Chicago. Knowing who they were, just to be able to hold your head up high at the dinner table was part of the game plan in my house growing up.
Did you have any thoughts at that time as that this could be a career, because you loved it so much?
I didn't know it existed. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, I was fortunate enough when I graduated from college. Mark McCormick, coincidentally, founder of IMG back in the day. Mark spoke at my graduation from St. Lawrence University. And I remember saying, "Who is this guy?" And the president of our senior class said, "Oh, he's great. He runs this sports marketing company." And there were some kids that were going to protest graduation, and I had to kind of defend him as our graduation speaker. I was on the senior class committee, and I went into the stacks back in the library. The internet was not around yet, and dusted off old copies of Sports Illustrated, and I'm reading about this going, wait a second, you can have a job going to sporting events for a career? This is incredible. And I knew I wanted to go into advertising, so it was a very quick jump. And the minute you told me I could use my passion for marketing and advertising in sports, I was hooked, and I stalked poor Mr. McCormick's assistant, Lori Roggenberg, in Cleveland for about a year, and called her from Japan. I went and taught English in Japan to kind of kill some time, and just called her at the wee hours of the morning and the evening when I was over there, and then finally landed my first job at IMG in 1992.
And you talked about the wanting to get into advertising, but let's look at that degree. And not that I want to belabor the point, though, but your degree was for me. I didn't even know that about your degree from your undergrad.
Oh yeah, I was a government Spanish.
You had a different idea about what you wanted to do with that degree.
Oh no, I mean I wanted to be a lawyer. Again, I knew I wanted to go into business. And was intrigued by marketing and advertising. So I always tell people I am much more of a marketer than I am, and I love sports. I am much more passionate about marketing than I am about sports, if that's possible.
Okay. Because
there's nothing to me that's better than seeing a tremendous campaign come together that resonates against all the objectives that client had wanted to achieve, and it connects and it takes off, and people really feel some connection to the advertising or the campaign. That to me is the Super Bowl every week.
One of the things you talked about Mark and looking up to him from the commencement speaker standpoint, and clearly you know him now. We all know him now, and the pioneer that he was. What I left off when talking about your background clearly is a little bit of a POV, right? So I want to talk about that because you've experienced the team, the league, the multimedia rights holder from the IMG and Learfield side of things. But starting your own agency, it was probably a very stressful thing. Probably still is stressful every single day. But started that a few years ago. So let's talk about POV if you wouldn't mind. And I guess what I'm curious about is the successes you've had, over the last 40 years or so, maybe who you're working with now. Let's just give I know people clearly are aware of it. Your victories have been out there at least. I pay attention to it because you and I have a history together. But maybe give people an overview of what you're working on or what you have worked on since 2016.
Yeah, gosh. So I left the Philadelphia Eagles in 2016, right after my last day was technically the day after they drafted Carson Wentz. So, and I remember Brian LaFemina calling me from Chicago from the draft saying, I heard you're moving on from the Eagles. What's next? And I said, I'm going to start a shop. And he said, let me know how I can help. And my feeling was after 25 years almost selling sponsorships, there's a point where do you go? You've kind of climbed the mountain, and you've climbed it more than once to kind of know what it's like to close a significant deal. And to me, sometimes the deals that were the best deals to work on and close might not have been the largest, but they might have been the first deal a brand ever did in sports sponsorship. So that was a big deal for them, and it was a really exciting opportunity to kind of show them the power of sports marketing and what it can do to help a brand. So as I said, my passion has always been about deal construct. I'm a total marketing geek. I love data. I love cool inventory and developing new inventory and saying, yes, a sign is great, and that will help us convey brand building, but what else can we do to really engage fans and get them to change a behavior? Go to a supermarket and actually say, there's this brand I'm looking for, can you help me find it? That to me is exciting stuff. So I started POV Sports Marketing. I took the summer off that year to kind of get the business plan together and all the different setup for the company put together, and then kind of hung out my shingle in September of 2016. And we have been blessed with opportunity after opportunity to work with both brands on traditional brand consulting, strategy, negotiation, asset management, activation. And then on the other side of our business, we have a kind of a tiny wall in the middle. We work with properties to help them put together their sponsorship foundations, their sponsorship sales department structure. One thing I've been very fortunate to do in my career is set up sales structure and manage sales teams. And so I really know what's the fluff that you don't need and what's the real, meat and potatoes of a sales department. And I've been fortunate between working at Learfield back in the day, the NBA, when Adam Silver was the deputy commissioner, Donna Orander, you mentioned earlier, was the president of the WNBA. And, I was hired there to set up a sales team because the NBA had always sold the WNBA as kind of an additional offering, from its product offering. And they wanted the W to stand on its own 2 feet. And I was brought in to build that out. And so I love building sales organizations and kind of coaching up sales folks. And so we've built this sponsorship edge product on that side that really helps work with NGBs. We've done a lot of work for ASM Global, formerly SMG, across the country. We actually did an analysis of the Pennsylvania Convention Center. So we have a lot of, to me, sponsorship, the entity can be different from one to the other, but it's really about process and procedure and understanding market rate beyond the sports world and really understanding what brands and marketers are looking at. So the two work together, the two sides work together very much, and they complement each other because it gives us great insights when we're buying for brands of real value and what rate is. And on the other side, we can share with properties without violating confidences what brands are looking for and what moves them and how they make decisions on where to allocate budget.
The beauty of, and I like the beauty of how your background translates into the, not that it doesn't translate into both sides, but clearly on the brand side, because you sat on the other side of the table, right? You've sold into it, the pricing, the inventory. Again, to your point, what the fluff is. Again, what can you do and what can't you do? And I love that you can bring that to them because they probably look at it and go, wow, that's, because you're not selling to them. You're bringing a different level of expertise to them. Sports marketer, not a sports seller, if you will, which I love.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Several folks have called and said, would you sell for us? And I kind of smile, and part of me goes, I do love sales, but to me, I'd rather teach people how to sell. So when we're talking with properties, I always say I'd rather teach you how to fish, and then have you be successful. And we have story after story of a seller calling and saying, well, I did what you told me, and I walked away. And I'm like, I needed you to walk away from that negotiation.
Yeah.
And then a week later, the phone rings, and they're like, oh my God, they called and just
said, worked.
Send a contract. And
Yeah.
I said, sometimes there's nothing left to be said. You have said you need to represent your property, and that brand will make decisions. And that's not anything sinister against the brands to say, sometimes a property needs to walk away and hold the line. But if you're going to cave, you're never going to have value. And brands will pay for value. You just have to show them the data that backs it up. And that's how the dance needs to occur. And times like these are very telling of why value is so important to demonstrate. To show partnership and sponsorship and not the transactional nature of traditional media as an example.
Well, and along those lines, clearly one of the newer happenings in I think the growth of the company, and maybe, and I would guess it was pre-pandemic as well, and certainly something you've been thinking about for a while, but spending time working on content and insights, tapping into the expertise of somebody like Amy Sheridan, going in again, not a different direction, but a complementary direction, right? And something that you can see how each of those parts of your company work together. So talk about the idea behind, utilizing Amy's expertise and her background and your idea behind it. Why start to go down that path of content, insights, et cetera?
No, it's a great question, and I wish I'd done it sooner. So we hired Technically Sports, which is Amy Sheridan's group, to come in and help us be proactive in developing content that promoted our agency a little bit more efficiently. We have done great work for brands like First Trust Bank and Wawa and Stroman and Independence Blue Cross and so on and so forth, a bunch of different brands within the Bimbo portfolio. And we're a boutique firm. And so we do all the work ourselves. And I'm involved in every deal we do, and I see everything that goes out the door. And in doing that as a smaller boutique agency, you kind of forget, it's like the shoemaker's children have no shoes. That old adage, I probably just butchered it, forgive me. But that idea of we needed to really take stock in the fact that we had something to say and needed someone to help us communicate it more efficiently, to tell people about the agency, the work that we're doing, how working with a boutique shop can be a really good choice for a lot of different brands who need a little bit of help, not necessarily to insource 4 to 5 people or build a team of 40 people to run a multi-million-dollar portfolio, but they need that insider look. And Amy really has helped us organize ourselves, conduct really strong outreach. I had not entered the podcast world until actually COVID. That was a bit of an accident because we had actually hired her March 1st, but she and I had put together the strategy and scope and the plan in February. And all of a sudden, everybody was listening and we had something to say and we were organized and we had put it together, and it was a great way to just communicate to people what myself, Greg Coleman, Zach Lazaro, Nicole Soskin, our team is putting together and doing it day in and day out. and talking a little bit about how we feel we can add real value to a brand's campaign and portfolio management in sports, and help NGBs and properties really go to market with a better, efficient sales strategy.
You used the word just a moment ago, boutique, and you named a few of your staff members there again. So just like Prodigy, right? Boutique agency, small, intentionally small, but nimble. And I know that word doesn't, the word small doesn't always come across the right way, but I think you did it intentionally, right? I mean, you're
Absolutely.
the idea behind being small and nimble, and again, the word boutique was done the right way, I think, and you did that with a few good reasons, I would imagine. So talk about that, right? Rather than being, again, the value in going to a boutique agency like yours, and I'm curious because that's part of our pitch too, right? Here's why you go with a boutique search firm instead of the global firm. What's your pitch on the boutique side versus going with somebody larger?
My pitch is that, listen, our perspective is our value. I mean, it's why I call the firm POV Sports Marketing, because for most agencies, they don't necessarily have my perspective. And having sold basketball, hockey, music, football, basketball, everything. I mean, I've sold everything. I've sold like the circus. I've sold Harlem Globetrotters when they would come through the Palace of Auburn Hills back in the day. So I think that perspective gives tremendous value to our clients, whereas Greg Coleman comes from a very high level traditional agency track. So there's times that I'll say something, he'll say, that's a really good way to look at it. I hadn't looked at it that way before, because our perspectives are different. And so I think when you look at a boutique agency, they're getting access to me, the clients, day in and day out, and I'm hiring extremely qualified people with MBAs and master's degrees in sports and whatnot, who have the ability to look at this a portfolio from a marketing perspective. Sports is the vehicle. The investments are all about marketing dollars and how are we helping brands. And I think that when the value in working with a boutique firm is that you're getting access to very high level experts who have been doing this for, God, I mean, it's frightening to say that Greg and I have in combined been doing this over 50 years together, and then some. And we've been through a lot of different downturns in the market. I mean, I've seen lockouts. I've seen what it was like after 9/11, an economic downturn, and being able to have that experience has been really valuable now. Of how do you do? What do you do? Brands are saying, what do we do now? And I'm like, you lean in, you double down. Let's call the teams and get going. When the tone can be appropriate, let's go. And they're like, really? We shouldn't wait? And I'm like, don't wait, because fans aren't waiting. They're looking for content. And so I think that's the value of a boutique firm, is really working with high-level executives in the industry that can help you make better decisions for your brand. And boutique means that your brand is very important to my company's existence. So it really takes on another tone. And I see you nodding. It's like you have clients that are really good friends because you've built a level of trust. And for some of my clients, I can finish their sentence. And they would laugh, and if they see this, they'll laugh and they'll go, actually, Molly can. And I can tell one of our clients, I can say, oh no, so-and-so won't like that. This is what he'll say. And then they'll ask him on an open call, and he'll say exactly what he said he would say. And I'm like, see, and therefore we have option 5. And option 5 is going to be the right execution. So I think that's the difference. You're not a number. You're important to that agency's business, and boutique is the way to go. I think it's a way of the future too, with all the change that's going on right now. Is small is going to become fashionable again.
Well, listen, the ability to be, I mean, people talk about nimble, flexible, quick, whatever words you want to use, but personal touch. I mean, I think there's so many, again, perhaps adjectives, et cetera, but I think they're all true, right? I mean, I would argue that there's
I agree.
A lot of truth in what you said about them being, again, they're important. Otherwise you wouldn't exist. That's the way small agencies need to look at it. So
you bet.
You mentioned the challenges, right? And you mentioned 9/11 a second ago, economic downturns. So during the course of your sales and marketing career, you experienced a lot of those challenges. And I hesitate to say this is comparable to any of those, because I think it is, every situation is unique. And I think 9/11 was very unique to the U.S. and it was very unique to New York in particular. And again, it certainly had its trickle-down effect on other things, sports and entertainment-wise. This pandemic is global, and it certainly has had an impact here in the U.S. So let's talk about. You said let's double down, right? I'll use your phrase. Let's double down. Let's still focus on selling and marketing and to the brands. The fans want to come back, so let's get to the fans somehow with your brand and with your message. So Do you see anything unique and new coming out of this? It doesn't need to be a new vertical or category. It doesn't have to be a new brand shining, although if you think any of those apply, maybe it's what current brands should be doing differently because sports and entertainment will be different coming out of the pandemic. What's your take on post-pandemic life as a sponsorship, sales, and marketing person?
From a sales and marketing standpoint, I think if I was running a sales team right now, not the brand side, but if I was in-house at a team, I would say we really need to go talk to our health partner, our health system partner, about how this can redefine what health partnerships look like and health insurance partnerships look like moving forward, not in the short term, but forever. Because I think that one thing that this has taught all of us on the planet is the importance of health and access to good health, and being able to listen to health officials and doing the right thing to take care of one another. And I think that there's real opportunity for health systems to create interesting content around this. Right now, they need to focus on providing world-class healthcare to those that are in need, and they need to keep their eye on that ball. But I think that there's a real opportunity here as more and more teams and entities are bringing in like a director of fan health or director of venue health and health safety, how do hospital partners and healthcare oriented brands have an authentic conversation with fans, because they can be part of that delivery, if you will. I think you're going to see gaming continue to just explode. I think in terms of sports betting, things like that. I think it's going to legalize at lightning speed, and I don't have any inside track. I just cannot imagine how states don't get this approved faster than before, because they're going to need revenue to offset a lot of different loss for companies in the state that are going to turn to state legislatures for funding, and the federal government's already doing it with the CARES Act. Where's the money coming from? Well, tax and betting is a way for states to raise money. So I think that that's something you're going to see. I know that those brands haven't stopped moving, nor should they. And I think that there's continuing to be a land grab in those spaces of who's going to get the IP rights of different teams across the country as states open up, to be able to be the top of mind choice for a fan. Innovation always comes out of crisis, and I think I can't wait to see innovative ways that fans are going to be able to connect with their heroes on the gridiron of the basketball court. And I think that that's something that I'm really excited to see that a lot of brands will be able to get to be a part of. How do we, integrating them into that innovative content that's going to come out of the new fan experience, or we'll call it the broadened fan experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was around when we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have iPads and tablet options, we didn't have, apps. You had radio and you had TV, and there were blackouts, in Philadelphia when I started in 2000, 4,000 or 5,000 tickets the day before the game had to be purchased, because otherwise the game was going to be blacked out. Yeah. So I remember that very traditional fan experience. I think there might be even more innovation around how do we continue to give fans access and experience that delivers value. I think that's going to be exciting to see.
What's your, I guess one of the things I'm curious about too, because you mentioned the fans, right? And we've seen a lot of conversation, every day you read something new in the public industry publications about sports restarting, right? And mostly without fans, if not entirely without fans. And some have already done it, obviously international soccer. WWE's been doing this for a while, but the UFC, PBR, clearly golf this past weekend, and motorsports as well. And so let's talk about that, because you talked about blackouts and the Eagles not being on TV. Now we're going the other way, which is everything's going to be on TV, but no, kind of the fanless sporting event or the fanless concert. And so I'm curious, because as soon as you started describing that, what can brands do now that you can't activate at a stadium or an arena, and you have to get creative on certain maybe digital platforms? Tell me what your thought is on what brands will be doing with a fanless sporting event.
I've talked to a lot of our clients about, I need you to envision the fact that you might have an entire season of away games. That's what it's going to feel like.
Okay.
And we love our teams, whether they're playing home or away.
Right.
And there's a lot of fans that will consume and have tradition and rituals around having neighbors over, or, they have to wear a certain jersey when it's a home game, a certain jersey when it's an away game. That in-home experience is just going to be your full season experience with a lot of sports. I mean, I think we know that when basketball comes back to finish out their season, which it sounds like they're getting closer and closer to announcements, and NHL is on their way, at least in the right direction. You know, we're not going to have fans and stands, but we're still going to have world-class broadcast coverage of these and world-class radio coverage of these wonderful games and events that we love. And I don't think it changes the experience for the fan. I think we're all thinking, oh my gosh, all those fans can't go to the building. But in the case of Philadelphia, as an example, the Eagles average like a 26, 27 household rating. And so what about all those millions of people at home that weren't in the building? Brands need to market to all of those fans. And while they may be losing 70,000 fans in venue, they're going to be able to reach all of the fans through digital, social, innovative content, you know, potential creative content through endorsement with athletes, you know, again, creating different touch points. The hardest piece is you can't do appearances.
Yeah.
You can't do private meet and greets. I think that's going to be one of the hardest pivots is how do we manage those types of opportunities? Yes, TV visible signage. If you bought courtside signage for the NBA, you're going to still have your courtside signage. Your LED ribbon board is going to be impacted. And so I think teams are saying, okay, let's dream up what could we do to offset that ribbon board? What could we do to create some interesting make good content or substitute content until we can come back? And obviously a lot of leagues are looking at different signage options to augment their existing TV visible. But one thing I've cautioned on is that we have to make sure that we don't junk up broadcasts so that it negatively impacts the fan experience, where you just have too much signage in the shot. Because if I bought courtside signage and you're going to create more and more signage behind it, it depreciates the value of what I bought. So that's something that the teams are going to want to be cautious of. You know, they're going to try to do what they have to do to survive these times financially. So they might do some things we don't like looking at.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, it becomes what we all joke about, the NASCAR car, right? And that would just might be in more in everybody's face, right? If they need to scratch and claw for every dollar. Hopefully not, but
yeah, it's you know, listen, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. I mean, you've got to cover revenue, but I think that brands are extremely open right now to innovation. Brands want to see from a content standpoint, what do you got? Because remember, the majority of brands pulled back all their advertising in the beginning of Q2. So the tail end of Q1, beginning of Q2. And a lot of them are quiet right now. Well, that means that, you know, they might have some hit on their business depending on the sector. Others are doing okay. And so if I'm a seller, I would be reaching out to everybody to say, you know, I don't know where you are in this, but when you're ready, you know, my property is here to help you be part of your Q3, Q4 plan and to kind of emerge in what we're going to end up living in for about a year. You know, so when we emerge in Q3, Q4 and go into Q1, Q2 of next year, while vaccines being addressed, you know, we're not going to be able to let our guard down when it comes to large scale events. I think it's hard to put 70,000 people in a building side by side, knowing what we know now, and think that that's going to just end on New Year's Eve, January 2021. Yeah. We're like, hey, it's over. No, it's gonna linger into 2021. And it's a drag, but you know, again, I think the content is there. People just it's harder, it takes more effort, and that's where teams are going to have to lean in on the effort of creating content.
You talked about just a moment ago about some ideas and some tenets you have about being a sales leader, and clearly at the beginning of our conversation, we highlighted that as part of your career, where you've managed and led teams of all shapes and sizes, but clearly, one of the other aspects of POV is that you can help build out, you know, sales teams and give them ideas about how to structure. So let's go down that path again, which you hit on just a moment ago. So that's where my head went. And I sat in on the beginning of the pandemic. I sat in on there was a Facebook Live session there was several hundred ticket sales people, there were 300-400 ticket sales people. I have nothing to do with ticket sales, but I was intrigued. I said, well, it can apply to my business, right? How are they going to do their job? How are they doing the job right now in March, April? You know, and how will that apply to what I do and my messaging, my outreach to people? But I think you have a unique perspective on what you would tell a seller right now, or what you would have coached maybe a seller to do in March or April, or maybe even May. We're going to be in June next week. So during the course of this whole mess, what's the messaging on how they should be doing their job? Premium sellers, ticket sellers, sponsors. Yeah. I'm not saying tell them.
Tickets are hard.
Advice?
Yeah. Tickets are really hard right now, and my heart goes out to ticket organizations. because it's hard to talk about, hey, the return of sports with no fans and no tickets. And, so I think that's a very difficult conversation to have right now. And, sadly, some of those folks might be laid off or furloughed because if there are not tickets to sell, it's a challenging situation.
Right.
I can speak to the sponsorship side of things. Sponsorship sellers should never stop selling, period. And how you sell may change and has changed in the pandemic. Cold outreach was a little hard in I would say March and April. It was very difficult. And what I was coaching up a lot of sellers is you've got to build your pipeline of who you would call and then figure out how to get to them through warm introductions on LinkedIn and other introductions in the industry, and going back to your alma mater, figuring out whose brother's friend's sister's brother-in-law's uncle works at that company who can get me that warm introduction. Give an example. One of our clients is Wawa, and I won't name the team or the seller, but she did an excellent job. This gal sent an email to the CMO of Wawa, and it was so well written and so well thought out that it got to me. And I always say, if it gets to me, it went through 3 other people, which means people listened. And it was what I loved about the outreach. And I picked up the phone and I called her, and I also called a leader at the team. And I said, this young lady is sharp, and she did it right, because she said, listen, I know it's an awkward time. That's the elephant in the room. It's an awkward time for outreach. But I understand a lot of brands are leaning in and other brands are being more cautious. I'd love to understand about your brand, where you are right now, to see how we could be a part of the resurgence in Q3, Q4 when you're ready to get loud again. And I thought it was so thoughtful because she didn't approach it like a sports fan. She approached it like a marketer. And I thought that was very, very sharp. And so I think that's really what I would coach young folks, not young folks, I mean sellers. You could be older than me and be a seller. Not a lot of them out there, but there's a couple, to just be able to say, listen, it's hard, but brands still need to sell their goods and services. And they need a way to connect with people, and sports content, sponsorship, things like that. Those are great ways to get in front of your potential customers and current customers.
You use the pronoun she to talk about that seller, so I'm gonna have to. My mind's been on this the entire time.
There's not a lot of us. That's the other reason I reached out, and I said, keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
So that it never ceases to amaze me, and this is going to be a long-winded question that I'm going to formulate. I think at some point towards the end there's going to be a question mark here, but you were a 2019 SBJ game changer. You don't want to talk about it. You're going to be angry that I brought it up, but you were. That's long overdue, by the way. And we didn't need the award to talk about the career you've had, but let's not ignore the elephant that we talked about a second ago. There's not many female sellers out there, and I think our industry needs to continue to do a better job of, yes, promoting and celebrating and hiring more females to executive level jobs. There's no doubt about it. But I continue to be amazed. Now, at the prior search firm and now at Prodigy for the last 5 years, that we're still working on this problem of finding more female sellers in ticketing, premium, and sponsorship. But since you have that sponsorship background, I love that perspective, but it applies across the board. Females always default towards the marketing jobs in sports or the HR jobs or the service positions. And I said, no, we want you to be sellers. Like there's jobs, like there's companies that literally will call Prodigy and say, only send us female candidates. I'm not going to tell you who they are because they probably can't do that, but they say, don't send us anything other than a female seller. I'm like, okay, let's find them. Let's find the 10. Like that is, so we want that challenge, but we also want to do everything we can to get them the jobs that they deserve and they earn. How do we get more female sellers in this industry, Molly? What do we do to bring them along? I'm just intrigued by where you would go with this one.
Yeah, no, it's something that always comes up, or, you see the panels of women in sports, and no one ever said to me in 1991, hey, when you call Mark McCormick, he's going to be shocked because you're a woman. I was like, but in college, they told me I could be anything I wanted to be. And my dad told me I could be anything I wanted to be. And my brothers were like beating me up behind the house saying, you throw mud, Tinker Toys with sand in it just as good as the rest of us. So, for me, the playing field was always even because I was always with a bunch of guys because I grew up with four brothers. And I was taught to compete. I know that Renee Anderson at the NFL is kind of in a similar, we come from families with lots of boys. And it was like, look, the lawn needs to get mowed. Hop on that John Deere track. I love mowing the lawn. You hop up, you mow the lawn, you achieve something, huge sense of self-gratification. I think the challenge is, as I pull a lot of young women aside, and when I see them in their 20s or they're at a team, and I'll pull them aside and I'll go, why are you in service? And they're like, oh, I love working with the brands. I'm like, you like marketing? You're like, yeah, I love it. And I'm like, okay, why aren't you selling? Oh, I couldn't sell. I couldn't sell. And I think that the job for leadership, male and female at teams now, is to help these people identify their skill set a little bit better and say, you know what, you have the core skills. We're going to help you develop and hone it. I think for years it was like, we put 5 guys in a room and say, who can sell, and 2 survive, right? The other 3 go and work for Xerox or IBM or whomever else. And they're not in the sports business anymore. I think we need to do the same thing with just talented, educated women, to say, if you can get comfortable sitting across the table and saying, it's a $2.9 million 7-year deal with 3.5% annual increases, playoffs are incremental, blah, 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 and they don't flinch, you've got a seller. So it's just learning the script. It's learning how to do it. And I credit Dan Hauser, who was my boss at Palace Sports and Entertainment, who now I get to work with as part of our agency as a subject matter expert. Just talked to him yesterday. I think guys like Tom Wilson at the Palace, who's now the president of Olympia and in the Red Wings organization, who helped me, again, open a door. They didn't look at the fact that I was a woman. They were like, according to Buffy Philippel, this gal can really sell.
Yeah.
And then, I ended up at the Eagles working for Len Komorowski. And I never intended to be the first woman hired by these folks. I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And, I didn't know I was the first woman. I remember Brett Yormark, I'm at the Palace. It's my first day. It's me and 13 guys. So again, multiply my brothers a couple times, and there you go. 13 guys and Molly selling at the Palace. And, here a phone call from a guy named Brett Yormark, and he goes, so you're the girl. And I was like, and he didn't mean it in a negative way. Brett's a great guy.
Yeah.
But he was like, so they hire you, because I took Brett's spot.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm the girl. Can I talk to you about this one deal you did? Because it didn't look so good. And we laughed, and it was funny. But, then at the Eagles, I was the next woman. Again, first time a woman had been hired in the sponsorship role. And Len was like, do what you do, replicate the Meyer deal here at the Eagles with the little company called Acme. And I'm like, okay. And Acme's been a partner at the Philadelphia Eagles for 20 years. So, no one ever told me I couldn't do it, but I think we as leaders need to identify people who have the core skill sets of sellers and teach them. And that's, again, back to what I do now as a company. Part of what we do is help teach people who don't think they can sell and they're not necessarily comfortable with it. We teach them a little bit. And once they catch the bug, forget it. They are on fire, and they're going to sell and be successful.
But to your point, I mean, you didn't want that to be the thing that was identified. I mean, you're just a good seller, right? At the end of the day, you wanted that to be the description rather than you having to insert the gender in front of it.
Yeah. I mean, and even Dan never said that. I never hired you. I didn't hire you because you were a woman.
Yeah.
I hired you because you sold sponsorships in a foreign language in Latin America. I can teach you how to sell hoops in Detroit.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the difference. Was I think I identify people who are competitive by nature, perhaps having 4 brothers, or being a competitive equestrian, or playing competitive sports. If you want to win, you're probably going to be a pretty good seller. But then teaching them the acumen and the nuance of sales and consultative selling and all these different things. So.
It's fascinating. I was speaking with a professor from a sport management program a few months ago, and they were talking about sales job descriptions. And I said, again, I don't read too much into those, but she was kind enough to go through a lot of them. She said a lot of sales job descriptions use male pronouns, and they actually, some of them had said, prior by accident, prior experience playing college baseball or college football. We're like, oh boy, well, you pretty much identified. You couldn't be any more blatant about what you want in that candidate, which is unfortunate, but hopefully we're moving a little bit past that.
Well, I mean, it's funny because, I remember I was flying from Detroit to Philadelphia for my interview with the Eagles, and I literally, had to do a little bit of homework on the Eagles. Like I grew up a Chicago Bears fan,
Yeah.
so I'm like, I remembered Randall Cunningham, but there were players that I didn't necessarily know. The hometown heroes, if you will, versus the national heroes. And so I remember having to do a little homework, and I'm like going in the interview going, don't forget there's 11 guys on each side of the ball. Like they were going to quiz me on, what's a slot left, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, they're not hiring me because I can go win and coach and win a football game. They're hiring me because I can go crack a category open, create competitive dialogues with a bunch of brands, to be able to get the deal that the team needs and build a deal that is going to be evergreen and really, have a long tail to it. So that's why they were hiring me. So I think that sometimes people, how much do you know about NASCAR? There's a lot of women, there's a lot of smart women that work at NASCAR, and they know what they're doing, and they probably never raced a car. So I think it's remember the role of that person in the organization, the chair you're putting them in, the skill set that they are bringing, which makes them an expert in sponsorship sales or has the ability to be an expert.
Well, I hope you don't mind me asking one final question about POV, because we talked a lot about it at the beginning, and I haven't really circled back around to your agency since then. What's the end goal of POV 3 years from now, 5 years? What do you want to happen? Do you want to continue to expand? Do you want another service offering you haven't thought? I mean, where does POV go from here?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually about to, expand the agency's team a little bit in the next 2 months. So we're very excited. There were some things we had to hit a slight pause on, but we're positioned for growth. I don't want the firm to lose its culture and its boutique nature. I don't have aspirations to go challenge one of the big giant shops or to be bought. I think my goal is to really, I'm looking to do this a long time. We'll just say I'm over 50 by a tiny bit. I got a lot of life, a lot of leadership left in me, and I think that there's so many brands that we can work with, and we're so grateful for the clients that we have, but we certainly have the ability to grow a little bit more, and are going to be really looking to build the brand side of our business. And again, the talent that we're bringing in is very much activation and strategy trained, which is critical. And I've always had aspirations to create some different softwares, and I'll kind of keep what they are myself. I don't want to share too much, but I have some vision. I have to, we're figuring out how to build some of them, but I think just keep an eye on us. We'll be around for a while, and are going to be looking to grow, and are excited to continue to
so stay boutique and stay nimble. Good.
I love boutique. Boutique is great. We have a lot of fun, and we have a great culture here.
I love the ability to innovate as an agency, finding and hearing you just a moment ago saying what you love to do moving forward. The fact that you're small and nimble allows you to do that. Innovate quicker, less red tape, less needing of approvals and bureaucracy. You can do your own thing and innovate quicker than most. So I love that.
Well, and it's I own the company. It's my shop.
You don't need any other approvals.
If I don't want to work with someone, we will gracefully decline the opportunity to meet. But I have my life. Life is to. I think if anything, COVID's taught us is to value friendship and relationships and good people who bring joy to your life. And I'm not going to work with jerks. That's a terrible quote to say, by the way.
We're going to close on that slogan. And there's going to be a big.
I don't want to work with. But let's be honest, life is too short, and we want to be able to become an extension of our brand's own departments. And so you want to enjoy being part of their culture and enjoy working with them. So I think that's my big thing is we're going to make good decisions that are good for the company, not always driven by the almighty dollar.
Love it. I love it. We can keep this going for another hour. I think unscripted, just off the cuff.
Just add a Moscow Mule and let's keep going.
I was going to say, if we could each have a cocktail. There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Obviously, continued success for you, for POV, as you grow, as you members. Awesome talking to you. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks, Mark. You well.